Thank you. Wow, this is great. What a great crowd. Okay, so I was told to let the panelists know that you have to push the button when you talk. All right? You guys good? All right. Excellent. All right. Wow, what a great crowd. Dr. Semmingson, we really appreciate your enlightening presentation. Some wonderful ideas here. And gosh, what, 6 to 8 months? What a change in our lives, right? So honestly, the origins, as Dr. Semmingson suggested, the origins of AI go back 1940s, 1950s, but in our world, they become part of our everyday life, right? She mentioned Grammarly, our friends Alexa, right? Siri, smartphones, smart homes, and the very expensive peer pressure statement, customers who bought this item also bought this item, right? That rabbit hole that steals your money. So why the sudden alarms around AI? Why the existential angst? Suggesting this is the end of humanity as we know it. What we are focused on today, however, with our panel is a type of AI that has many educators shaking in their boots and others eagerly embracing this new frontier, and this is generative AI. So alas, our conversation today is not about whether the sky is falling or whether to ask if we should use AI, but rather how we can use it. All right, so let's get started. All right, this is an all skate. So this is up for any one of you in no particular order, and here it is. As the world of artificial intelligence, or AI, continues to evolve at a breakneck pace, how can Collin College, as a leader in higher education, leverage its core values to equip our students with the knowledge and skills to navigate the complexities of built-in biases while promoting the ethical and responsible use of generative AI? Who wants to go first? All right, John.
So the first thing, make sure that, I don't have to hold it down. Okay. The first thing I would say is that I think our commitment as educators and as college as a whole is to foster, promote, inspire learning in our students. In fact, that's one of the core values, the first core value of our college. But learning is making meaningful connections between what we already know and the new information that we encounter in our classes across various kinds of contexts. In order to foster and promote and facilitate that kind of learning, students have to do something with their minds. And so I will be on this panel as a kind of antagonist towards the enthusiasm for ChatGPT and other generative AI, because I think our fundamental task as educators is that we have to ask ourselves before we deploy any of these tools in our classrooms, are we facilitating, promoting, inspiring learning in our students? And we already know what learning is, because the state of Texas has told us what learning is. They are those core outcomes, right? Can the student communicate what they're learning in an oral or written way? That is, can they express their thoughts in a material system of signs that can be read by someone else? Can they think critically? Can they ask counterfactual questions? Can they ask for and evaluate evidence for a given claim? Can they solve problems? Can they answer their own questions or pose new questions? This kind of critical thinking is an expression of learning. My contention will be that we need to be very careful and judicious about the way we incorporate AI tools into our classrooms. If we are facilitating learning in the student, then it can be used. If, however, we're outsourcing the cognitive processes that we're asking students to develop and those habits of mind to an AI system, then all we're going to be measuring with our assessments is the machine learning. And I think we have to be very careful about that, and there are ways to incorporate it in a very judicious way, in an assistive way. The assumption, however, is that students will only use it in in an assistive way and won't use it in a generative way. And I think that will be the question that we have to sort of think about.
Right. Thank you, John. Anybody else like to answer that one?
I think John makes a great point about how to use AI. I think that's one of the things that, we as educators have to use a good judgment, wise judgment. But it's with anything, right? I remember when I started doing online courses and started using publishers' material, right? So you could do an online course just with using the publisher's material and not put your input in at all, which is not at all helpful for students. So we as educators, make those judgments anytime we use anything, not just AI. And we have to do the same thing with AI. But as far as ethics is concerned, I think that one of the things that we have to be very careful about is to explain and be transparent to our students about what AI is and what you can do with it in the classroom, right? So have a comprehensive syllabus in which you lay down those whatever ethical constraints or limitations that you have for using AI. And also, I feel as a leader in higher education for Collin College, they should probably have, or we should probably have ethical workshops on AI, make students more aware, maybe have courses. And actually, these should be interdisciplinary courses so that we have ethics combined with a science course or a literature course. And that way they can understand what the potential of AI is, but what's the ethics behind it? How can you use it? How you should not use it? I think that's the discussion we should be having with our students. I feel that it shouldn't be not using AI because it's an amazing tool. Why would you not want to use such an amazing tool? But how you use it, how you harness it, is actually the way that we should think about using it.
Thank you, Sukanya. All right, well, we'll ask for one more panelist to give input. Anybody want to answer that one?
I think we also, as educators, are preparing our students for life and work. And the genie's out of the bottle. It's here to stay. And learning the skills and how to apply their knowledge to this new domain, I think is really important. So I'll talk later about prompt engineering, but I have used it in my classes in the spring and summer, and it's a very staged process. I throw them in sink or swim first and let them just get a feel for it. But if you haven't been on it, you should get on it because wherever you start, people are generally bad at it to begin with, and practice, and well-instructed practice that's really skills-based and building critical thinking and communication skills, I think is important. And my students have talked about using it and how I use it I teach for iCollin, so all online. So I have synchronous Zoom meetings with my students where they do teamwork with it, and like I said, it's a very staged process. First you do this, and then you come back, we talk about it, then I throw you in and you do this, and you apply it in different ways from creativity to critical thinking. And my students come out the other end and talk about how they've learned to self-direct their learning in a lot of ways. They've learned to ask it to level where they are in a concept if they don't understand it, instead of waiting, till the next class to ask the question or emailing the professor and all of that. They have learned to, say, explain this to me like I was a 10-year-old. Plus, there are a lot of tutorial Socratic method tools that are coming out. Conmigo is one of them. And it's going to be, I think it's going to bring a lot of equity to education, and it's going to bridge some gaps between parents and children and teachers. So I think the potential is great, but I also think the potential for abuse is great. And if they're put in a position where they can use it to cheat, they will. So I think it's important to really be cognizant about how we're laying it out for them. So I'll talk more about that later.
Thank you, Mindi. And honestly, John, even as an antagonist, as we heard, right, Sukanya and Mindi, all three of you did not say never use it. You're saying we need to be intentional about how we use it and teach our students how to use the tool, right? So I think that nicely frames the next question. John, you mentioned assisted versus generative uses of it. So this one's for you. And by the way, at the end, if there's time, I'd like the three of you to address that first question too. For the sake of time, I want to get into some of these more specific questions. Okay, so Dr. Macready, there's a discussion obviously in AI community centering on the difference between AI-assisted writing, you teach a writing-intensive course, and AI-generated writing. Can you briefly explain your understanding of these concepts and how faculty can instruct students on the differences? And I have two follow-ups for you after that.
Okay. Yeah, so the generative use or generative function of AI is what we're probably already aware of, where a student takes your prompt from the assignment and puts it into ChatGPT, generates an essay, and drops that into the submission portal, and done. And you read it and you think, my God, what is this?
Oh, John,
It can be.
you move up a little closer, I'm sorry. They're not able to hear you back there.
If I could, if they refine it a little bit more, maybe they spend another 2 to 3 minutes refining, a 2,000-word essay. They could ask it to use more sophisticated language, add some additional citations and the like, and you may get even a better essay, right? But total time spent for the student may be maximum of 10 minutes. Have they read the material? No. Have they done a literature review? No. Have they asked counterfactual questions of the sources they're using? Did they do any evaluation? Do they even know what it means to research? Have they answered a question, solved a problem? All no. Learning hasn't taken place. That's a generative use of AI. An assistive use of AI would be something like, let's say that you give them a text to read. In my class, the first thing they read in Intro to Philosophy is Plato's dialogue, The Sophist. And let's say that I ask them to read the intro to that dialogue and write a summary of the main questions that are posed in that intro. Now, they could go into ChatGPT and put that in and get some kind of dribble out of it. I can tell you that ChatGPT doesn't read The Sophist very well. In fact, it keeps confusing it with other dialogues and all kinds of other nonsense. But so far I've got a AI-resistant idea. But I could first ask them, look, write down what you think the main questions are. Have them do that in class. And then say, now I want you to take those when you go home tonight. I want you to put that into ChatGPT. I want you to ask it to evaluate your reading versus their reading. And then bring that back to class. And then in your teams, maybe you'll discuss that and you'll tease out maybe 2 or 3 questions that you think are really prominent in that intro. Now, that would be an assistive way to use AI. They have done the reading, so they've practiced reading comprehension. They've done some in-class writing, so they engaged in this process of both critical thinking and also communication. You know, if you're doing other kinds of psychological, sociological research, maybe they've done some quantitative and empirical studies and analysis, so you can get a lot of those core objectives done in those in-person physical kinds of writings, the old school kind of education that we used to do, right? So, but you're also letting them use this tool. Now, again, my reservation is that I think there is a false assumption that students will limit their use of these tools. But when the students see that these tools can do a lot more than just evaluate their handwritten summaries, and maybe this is the pessimist in me, but I think they will likely choose a path of least resistance, and they will lean on and become dependent on AI a lot more, and learning will not take place. That said, I wouldn't say that we need to completely ban it, although it's banned in my classes. But I wouldn't suggest that to everyone, because there may be ways that are discipline-specific that might facilitate learning. These are new tools. If you can find a way to do it, but the idea is that we're educators. That word comes from a Latin word, educare. It means to take one out of one's context and open you up to a variety of different views so that you can see things differently, right? To ask yourself questions, to grow as a human being. That is what we're supposed to be doing. If you deploy these tools in your classes, that needs to be your question. And what I'm about to use in my class, is this going to facilitate learning? Is this going to be an education, or is this simply information transfer and machine management?
Thank you. So you actually answered some of the follow-up questions, because I was going to ask you about your version of acceptable and unacceptable uses, right? Being able to show students what they can and can't do. And in your case, you're saying, maybe in the group work, so it's not totally off the table, but you're leaning more toward don't use it here, right?
And that comes from using it.
Right,
So
exactly.
I did use it in the first semester that ChatGPT came out. I said, great, I'm going to embrace it. This is great. I'm going to get students to improve their writing. And it really didn't. They weren't, first of all, a lot of students said, can I not use it? Because they just wanted to write the essay. They found it more complicated to try to turn the prompt into some kind of prompt for the AI. They found that difficult and cumbersome. They'd rather just write the essay, or maybe they bought them, I don't know, but I suppose that they wrote them. But they preferred not to use it. But what the essays that I did get, I had them first do a draft, then go back and revise that draft. They had to enhance it with secondary literature and primary literature that was analyzed and evaluated. And those papers were better, but I wasn't seeing the kind of learning that I was hoping that it would really get to. And the reason is this: we are educating in a system in which grades and GPAs are tied to economic viability. When it comes down to it, our working class students in these two-year colleges are trying to get a leg up. They need your class. They need the credit to get onto the four-year college, to get the degree, to get the job, to get the money, to have some kind of economic advancement. And when you start saying to them, I need you to do all this work, and they find that there's a tool that can help them more efficiently do it, where they can spend more time with their families, spend more time working overtime to pay for these college courses, they are going to take that path of least resistance. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind. How can we as a college and as faculty preserve learning for our students, given the system that we're educating within and given the new technological environment that we're in?
Thank you for elaborating on that. And it does bring to mind the importance of awareness, which we heard earlier, right? You have to know more than your students do, and in order to know what kind of outputs are out there. And I think that becomes part of the learning process, and in classes start in 2 weeks. So there's a lot to learn in a short amount of time. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit because John represents some of the greater challenges with generative AI because he's in a writing-intensive class, right? So that's where a lot of the challenges are seeming to kind of bubble up, are the writing-intensive classes. But Dr. Tinnen represents the fine arts, and if you've been paying attention to what's going on in that world, that's another area where there's a lot of alarms, but there's a lot of amazing opportunity. So let's shift gears, and Dr. Tinnen, this one's for you. As AI has unfurled its reach in the last several months, many educators fear that accepting and integrating AI use will stunt student creativity. As the Dean of Collin's Fine Arts Programs, do you share this fear? number one? And if not, how do you think AI can inspire creative thinking?
Thank you, Regina. I do want to thank you for inviting me to serve on this panel, you and Dr. Boyer. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here to represent the arts. Many of you don't know me. I am dean over mostly the fine arts and humanities, speech. But I'm also a practicing artist myself, and when I was faculty, I taught photography. So I'm going to start way back. So during the Renaissance, the highest, yes, but I'm not going to stay there. I'm not going to stay there. I was also a humanities professor, so. Okay, I will not stay there. But I just want to mention that during the Renaissance, the highest technology that was available to reproduce reality was painting. And then in the 1800s, photography came along. And everybody thought, it's the end of painting. Painting is dead. But we know that that didn't happen. What happened instead was it changed what a painting could be. It opened up new art movements. It opened up new avenues of creativity and artistic expression. And then I think about George Eastman, who, because photography was very clunky when it first came out, and he said, I want to make it, I want to open it to everyone. I want to make it more accessible. And so he revolutionized consumer photography, and that opened up accessibility. Then digital photography came along. And now every one of you uses your camera phone. You're all photographers. Well, you're all image makers. You all make images. Because I do want to say that there are still people that pay photographers. We have a wonderful commercial photography program here. It is still thriving because people want a good image. I'm not saying you're not a good photographer. Most of you probably are. But when it comes to important events like, photographing your wedding or, special events in your life, we still hire a photographer because they can make good images and people want good design. So what is being accomplished currently through text-to-image generators like Midjourney, DALL-E, and Adobe Firefly, that is going to increase the rate of artwork production and the number of people producing art. So there will be, just like there was more photographers when camera phones came out, now there will be more artists out there. In art education, we focus more on communication, on concepts, on ideas, and the execution part is actually secondary. As educators, I believe it's our responsibility to train our students in AI to prepare them for the workforce, because the workforce is already embracing AI, it's already out there. Some junior level artists have lost their positions due to AI. So we need to train students to understand that AI can create hundreds of versions of something, but what is good and what is bad? Like, they need that skill. They need to be able to differentiate between that. So recently in May, in our Communication Design Advisory Committee, one of our industry professionals mentioned that curating is a skill that is going to need to be taught to our students. Students still need to learn what it means to have good design, and although AI can create faster, students haven't had the good experience to know when AI produces a bad image. They don't know what is a good job. Like, that is our job, is to say, this is good, this is bad. Learning what prompts to use is going to be so important because that requires skill, that requires creativity, and then they can submit their prompts along with the image that they created. Prompt engineering is going to be a skill that we need to add to our students' tool belts before they leave Collin. They still need to come up with their own ideas, and maybe it could be a starter for an idea. But that is where creativity is going to take place. It's going to take place in learning how to be an art director. And in the creative fields, AI is going to be more of a collaborator more than a competitor. It's not going to replace the artist or the designer, in my opinion, but it will change the role of the artist. I read an article recently that called it a new art movement. We will learn eventually to adapt to our new world with AI, but we will need regulation to protect data, what can be accessed, since there are ethics involved. Some artists are stating that the large AI systems stole their intellectual property, because in order to come up with those millions of images, they had to come from somewhere. And so they were used to train AI systems, but were used without an artist's permission. So there are concerns. And something that I do fear, and this to me is very scary, is what can be done with someone's voice. So in music, it is possible to train AI with the voice sample. Songs can be created using that song sample, and it can be done without the artist's permission. And so that same technology then can be used to mimic someone's speech. It can misrepresent views. That opens up a very scary world to me. So we do need regulation. We need to protect intellectual property, but there are also so many positive aspects, and it's not going to go away. It's only going to keep getting stronger. It's going to keep getting better. So I believe that we should all start playing with AI, see what it can do, come up with your own creative ideas for how you can use it in your classroom. And I'm not saying, because this is going to take a lot, so I'm not saying change everything that you do, what you're currently doing. You know, as long as we're still conveying our SLOs and learning is taking place, why not incorporate some AI?
Thank you, Lupita. So I want to be mindful of time. We've got 4 more questions and a few closing thoughts here, but just an observation is clearly what we've heard so far is quite varied, right? And I would challenge all of you in this room, faculty in particular, this is where your academic freedom comes to play, right? No one up here is dictating to anybody how to do it, and there's a lot of ways you can do it. But talk amongst yourselves. I mean, there's a lot to learn here, and it is a little overwhelming for all of us, right? But as we heard earlier, Dr. Semmingsen said, we're all in this together, right? We're all in this together. So let's lean on each other. All right, moving on. All right, so again, for the sake of time, I want to move through these 4 and give everybody an opportunity to kind of elaborate on your specific question. And Mindi, you're up next. This one's for you. All right. As it relates to the use of any generative AI platform, the common understanding is garbage in, garbage out. Briefly explain your knowledge of how thoughtful and informed prompt engineering enhances critical thinking.
Good. So let me just reiterate how important AI literacy is right now. We're going into an election. Students need to be able to understand what can be done with it, to be on the lookout for abuses of it. And so first you have to know what AI is, generative AI, not all AI, but generative AI. First of all, it has no opinions. It has no emotions. It is completely literal, and it has no context. So knowing that, when you go to it, students, all of us, because of our biases and heuristics and all of that, we make assumptions about things. And we expect that people know what we're communicating. And we make a lot of assertions that we think, well, I said this, I meant this, you should have understood that, right? This generative AI brings this into high relief. If you ask it a question or give it a prompt that is vague and general, you're going to get a vague and general answer. So, like I said, I throw them in first, sink or swim, and just say, hey, take this topic to it and see what it says. And I give them a choice between, I teach humanities, so there are a lot of choices. But Taoism and Buddhism, or, Plato and Aristotle, or, whatever it is. And just give them something that's just that and see what they get. And then they read through that. And the next thing I have them do is identify anything that is unclear to them, anything that they need more detail about, more precision. So, anything that's irrelevant to actually drive it deeper. So I have, this is called the genie out of the bottle assignment. And I tell them the goal of this assignment is to use their best skills in communication to, they've got their seed prompt that they put in that's just, this and that, right? And then see what it generates. And then they've got 3 more prompts because it's a genie. You get 3 wishes. So 3 more prompts. And the goal is to find out as much as you possibly can about this in just those 3 prompts. So I was fascinated that my students at the end of this, almost always, the 3rd question that they asked was relevance. How does this relate to me in some way? Apply this to my life, which then after they do all of that, there's metacognitive reflection, which you have to think about the process. How did you use it? I have them, thankfully, ChatGPT and GPT-4. You can have a link to that conversation thread, and they just provide me the link. I go in. If they use a different generative AI, that's fine. But they have to give me the whole transcript of what they did. They have to, and I tell them, you have to ask it for references, right? Which this is where a lot of hallucinations happen that will just fake it, right? And then, so they have to fact check any truth claim that they've gotten. They have to look it up and find out, is that true or not true? They have to identify any biases. I think one of the things that we found with all of this hitting the floor running, especially in the text-to-image AI, that it really is the emperor has no clothes. Our biases are in full sight. And so I think it's really important for them to understand the cognitive biases that we have. So prompt parameters are really important. You need to specify your requirements, your constraints, your restrictions. The more precise and specific you are, the better. Another approach that's really good is chain of thought prompting, where they have to, like if they're going to do a research something, they need to stage it so that they know where they're coming from, where they want to get to, and then they have to break it up into different chunks that are cohesive and coherent, and then look at it as they march through that. It does much better than if you just throw the kitchen sink at it and it gets confused. And like I said, context is really important. It has no context. So we make a lot of assumptions about the context of things when we're communicating. So being really specific about how you keep that in context so it doesn't just run wild with it is important. There's also something called role or persona prompting, where you can tell it, I want you to act as a creative writing instructor and evaluate this, whatever piece of writing you've done, and give me specific feedback in these ways. Grammarly, we're back to Grammarly, does a lot of this. You can use that to do your editing. And by practicing this and getting to the point where you can ask it seriously to be any persona you want, and it will come back with that gauged response that's within that framework.
Mindi, I'm going to interrupt here just for a second, just for the sake of time. For those of you that know Mindi, she knows a lot about prompt engineering and has actually written a guide and has shared that with us. So for the sake of time, and to also kind of let you all know, and Dr. Boyer will say more about this, but there will be specific webinars, training about how to do prompt engineering, right? So just so we can get on, again, the level of knowledge that Mindi has is quite phenomenal at this point. Having said that, if you're okay, I'm ready to move on just because we've got limited amount of time. If you've got one more comment.
One more
okay.
thing that I think is really important, and that is transparency. And just being transparent with your students about how you use it and making sure that they are transparent about how they use it. And any assignment you do, I would suggest that you do the metacognitive reflection at the end where they really evaluate their use of the tool and they're very specific about their process, because you can help them with that.
Thank you. That's a really important point. As part of the ethics and the responsibility is the transparency piece. All right, so now we're going to shift a little bit. Sukanya, you are the STEM field girl here. So this is taking a little bit of take. You know, again, this panel represents a wide swath of our disciplines, and I think it's a great question here for Sukanya. As an instructor in a STEM field, how do you see AI impacting the biological sciences and other disciplines in the STEM field?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to be in the panel. And I'm not an expert like Mindi. I'm a beginner like many of you. When I first heard about ChatGPT, I was like, excited would be the word. I was like, oh my God, what can I do with it? And I went in, I got an account, and I started playing with it. And I would advise everybody to do that. It's an amazing tool. Play with it. See what you can do with it. And I just want to say that when I started using it, it was not a replacement to learning. It enhances the learning for the student. It actually is a win-win situation for both faculty and for students. I like to tell my students that I'm teaching you how to learn, and the AI can help you with that. In the biological sciences, and I think in other STEM fields, understanding concepts is very important because it's not tangible. It's something that you have to understand, something that is, you know, evidence-based and proven, but at the same time, it's not something tangible. You need critical thinking skills. You need to apply. There's a lot of information in the STEM fields, but you have to learn to apply it. And all of these things can be assisted by AI. But the only thing is you have to think about what sort of assessments or what sort of questions or what sort of lesson plans you're going to give to your student. I remember when Google first came out, it was scary. It was like, oh my God, my students can answer everything now because all they have to do is Google the question and they'll get the answer, right? And pretty much all of the test bank questions are, you know, out there in the internet, right? And so what did that make us do? It made us become more innovative in our assessments, right? We said, okay, we're not going to do multiple choice answers. Let's try to think of something else which gauges their learning, right? And it made us more creative. So I really feel AI will help us do that. I remember telling my students, for me, Google is next to God. Now I'm going to tell my students, AI is next to the Almighty, because that's how I feel. I feel so excited by what AI can do for the students. And I have applied a little bit. I think one of the things that it does, and I actually went to a couple of seminars by Khan Academy, and they have this amazing tool called Khan Amigo, and it's actually interactive. You can actually learn from it in real time when you're like, oh my God, I don't know what this is. Can I go and find out what this means? What is this concept? How can I understand it? In fact, one of the things that I have done is sometimes I tell my students, go to AI, create a multiple choice question on something, photosynthesis. Try to answer that question. And if you don't answer it, ask, why is this not the answer? Because you have to learn from your mistakes. And AI actually helps with that. It can be interactive. And so that personalized learning path is something the students can have. Real time, very advantageous. Language barriers, actually language translation. A lot of students are international students, and they really find it hard to grasp the language in many of the STEM fields. So it's actually it's very important. For us, for the faculty, enhancing your content. You can actually get a lot from putting things into AI, get ideas. I remember once my students failed in exams, which of us didn't have that, right? And I said, oh my God, I have to give them something supplemental to really find out whether they understood this, because obviously my exam they couldn't get. So actually, I use AI to generate some questions. Not that you take everything from it, you tweak it, right? Like we do. It just gives you kind of a framework to work with. It actually helps you, and for us, virtual labs. That's a big thing. And AI is, a big, it enhances our virtual labs so that the student can get the real experience, because I teach online courses, so I really rely on many things which are virtual. And as I said, it makes us become more innovative and creative. I'm not going to go into more things here, but all I want to say is, if you use AI, rethink your assessments the way that you're doing it for your students, become more innovative and creative, and see how you can use whatever AI has given you to make students learn, because that's our main objective.
Thank you very much, Sukanya. Appreciate that perspective. All right, so Juli, Westcott, Director of Health Professions. She's our workforce representative. So let's get into this, Juli. Employers are expecting their new hires to have AI skills. Resume Builder reported a survey they conducted in April of this year among 1,187 business leaders, found 92% of them are currently hiring, and of those who are currently hiring, 91% want workers with ChatGPT experience. Further, most AI experts suggest AI will bring profound and exciting breakthroughs to the healthcare industry. That's you. As a director of health professions and an instructor, what role will AI play in your curriculum?
So I'll try to keep this pretty short, because these folks have touched on a lot of the key factors. Like context, especially in healthcare, is huge, right? Somebody comes to me, I'm a chiropractor, and they say, I have low back pain. I probably would like to know whether it's a kidney stone or they've blown a disc, right? So we need a little bit more context to be able to understand what's going on. So as far as the curriculum that we're doing in the healthcare field, I think you folks know we're adding a fourth degree, bachelor's degree in health science, which is wonderful. We're not going to have a specific course in AI, but we really do integrate it into all of our courses. We just have a whole department in health science that's called simulation, and their job is to sort of fabricate situations for the students to get that opportunity in a safe space where they're not going to hurt anyone, to practice some of the skills that they're going to do. And so that's been for years, I mean, since well before I was here. Now we're moving into more things like what my department uses, a course we call our personability course, where we teach them soft skills that most of us can agree are lacking currently. But one of the things I like about it is it has this simulated interaction, 3 of them, but one is they're interacting with a patient, and so they have to type on the computer what they would say to the patient, and then the patient's gonna respond to them based on what they say. This can take 10 minutes, or it can take 2 hours, okay? Because it depends on what they're gonna say. So anything we can do to help make the patient experience better through training on our curriculum, I think is gonna be really helpful. In the field, we're using things like diagnostic imaging evaluations. So I was a big nerd in x-ray. I loved x-rays. I almost went into radiology. But if you're staring at x-rays all day, you could imagine your brain gets a little tired, right? The AI doesn't. So it can actually recognize things on the x-ray that I might miss as a human. So I think taking it in the perspective of it's a resource, not a replacement, for healthcare is essential because of that context factor and because of ultimately medicine is an art. Okay, there are standards for most things, but not everybody shows up the same way, right? Not everybody has the same symptoms. Not everyone responds the same way to treatment. So to think of replacing, I think we already have telemedicine that's sort of automated, right? Which in most cases, okay, you have a cold, fine, give you some medicine, but there are more complex things. And so I think learning, like everyone else has said, how to harness the information there, because it certainly makes things a lot faster. I mean, I'm not an expert by any means, but when I played around with ChatGPT, I thought, man, that would have taken me an hour to come up with that list of things, right? So just helping to streamline things so we can serve more patients and serve them better is great. But my biggest concern would be sort of a negligence factor where we would lean on the AI too much and lack that, personal interaction with the patient, right? I could just type stuff in and be like, you got, cholecystitis, fine. Well, maybe they don't. And I missed it because I didn't put in the effort and lean too much on the tool. So those are the things I think we can teach the students in class, is just learning how to use the resources we have, but also lean on our own experience and that learning and those critical thinking skills that we've gained in our education. That's going to be the key. And then just making sure that we, are protecting patient data and all of that kind of information. So it's exciting. I think we're on the precipice of a huge transition in healthcare into AI usage. That's going to increase availability and accessibility for people. Fantastic. We just need to make sure that we are monitoring how it's being used and that we're having oversight and not sort of letting the computers do all the work.
Well, thank you for that. We're very happy that our nurses will not rely totally on, right? All right, so Terrence Brennan, we told him he was on the hot seat. And it really is, this is one of the areas that I will say most faculty are the most concerned about, right? So from the fear-inspiring headlines to the panic-inspired faculty, many educators fear that AI will present a license to cheat, right? So in fact, the majority of questions that you all submitted to the questionnaire that Dr. Boyer sent out in advance centered on this desire to hear more about anti-cheating measures. That's our guy right here. So here are the questions. What has the Dean of Students Office seen in the last 6 months regarding academic integrity and student use of AI? I'm going to give you all these questions because I know you're prepared. How is your department preparing for what will surely be an increase in faculty submissions of AI-generated cheating as presented by unreliable AI detectors? Right? Okay. All right, so, those are some of the questions. I know you have a lot to say.
All right. AI. So I'm of two minds when we talk about AI, because I'm not just the District Dean of Students of Student Conduct, I'm also over the Access Office. So there's a part of me that we're in a renaissance when we deal with adaptive technology. And it's been a wonderful thing to see, just in the last 6 months, the type of adaptive technology that we're able to utilize for our Access students to provide greater accessibility, which is always a good thing. So yay, good. The bad. When I put on my Watchman cap, right, and which is why I'm here today, the Grim Reaper cap, to talk about student conduct, what we've seen over 6 months is, of course, what you would expect. We're averaging on a slow day about 25 to 27 submissions for AI-generated scholastic dishonesty. During peak periods, midterms, into the semester, we're averaging over 100 submissions a day. To put that into context, I have 6 case adjudicators with a caseload of about 180 cases each, trying to adjudicate those as quickly as possible. To make things a little bit more complicated, when we deal, as Regina mentioned, as you've probably encountered, the countermeasures that we currently have at our disposal to combat this type of AI-generated plagiarism or scholastic dishonesty, they're not exactly accurate, any of them. And so this has made what used to be a pretty streamlined process to detect scholastic dishonesty a little bit more of an art form. It's a little bit more legwork on our part, a lot of research. We run 8 to 9 different AI detectors. We do the research. We actually will look at the prompt and try to determine what is human, what is not human. And the most important part of this process is the interaction that we have with the student, because that's the opportunity that we get to really ascertain what the student knows about the assignment, what research they did. Now, fortunately, and I say this, and I'm knocking on wood or whatever material this is here, most of our students, and experienced in the Dean of Students Office, and this is true with AI, are not Hannibal Lecter, they're not master criminals, and they don't necessarily know about how to engineer a prompt that's nuanced and sophisticated and will produce, something that's always a passable paper. So what we're also seeing is, of course, what we've talked about here today, hallucinations. AI still has a penchant for creating resources and kind of degrading as the paper goes along. So, however, that's improving, and that will continue to improve as the technology improves. So what we're seeing is that it's kind of a return to this interactive process where we're having to attack the problem from a lot of different strategies and utilize a lot of different strategies.
All right, again, we'll probably be having something specific to the Dean of Students Office as it relates, because I suspect your workload is probably going to go up drastically in the fall, now that we're all aware. And now that the students have the summer to figure out how to use those AI detectors and perfect them. So here we are. All right, first of all, I have some closing thoughts here, but I did want to take the time to thank all of our panelists for agreeing to participate. We truly appreciate your insight, and we know that this topic will continue to inspire our creativity and innovation, so let's give a round of applause to them. All right, and so the last thing that I would like to say before Dr. Boyer comes up and wraps this up is we do have a committee here at the college that first met in February. It's called the COAID Committee, and I'm going to give you, we got a lot of acronyms, right? But I'm going to give you what that means. It's the Collin Online Academic Integrity Defensive, right? That word defensive is interesting because this originated with Provost Brendan Mesh. Actually, last fall, the idea came to mind, and it was created essentially to focus on identifying the tools faculty might need to counter cheating websites such as Chegg. And if you watched what happened to Chegg after AI came out, right? All right, so then generative AI was unleashed in the form of ChatGPT at the end of November, and the world as we know it has forever been altered. All right, so the AI in COAID turn to academic integrity artificial intelligence light of generative AI. So where's my co-chair, JD Isip? JD, are you in the room? No? Is he here? He's out there? JD, there he is. All right, so JD and I serve as co-chairs of the COAID committee. It's about a team of 35 of us at this point, serving a 3-year term, a few administrators, but mostly faculty from around the district. And we are currently working to propose a set of usage guidelines, right? From an institutional standpoint, from a faculty standpoint, and at the student level. So our first meeting was in February, our second was in May. We have 4 subcommittees: pedagogy, education, policy, and effectively cheating mitigation. And we're working on those specific aspects of the AI, and we meet next week to shore up our proposals. And in the meantime, I know this is almost like a fire hose for many of you. Dr. Boyer and the Center for Teaching and Learning will continue to serve as the repository for a lot of these AI resources that you guys are getting slammed with. So Dr. Boyer, can you kind of come up here and give everybody the preview of the future plans with the AI? No pressure.
No pressure. Well, honestly, I think Regina has already told you most of what I'm about to tell you, and that is the CTL is going to follow up all of these great discussions that we've had today with Dr. Semmingson and our panelists, as well as the panels that we had over the summer, the webinars, for those of you who may have attended those. If you didn't, they're recorded on the YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. We're going to take a deeper dive into some more specific topics that we just kind of touched on today. So things like ethics, prompt engineering. Terrence, we might ask you to come and have one session devoted to that. Sorry. Things like that. And also, The CTL is going to have a landing page on its website devoted specifically to resources about AI, about all of these things. So there are already some resources on there. Some of you may have already visited those on the teaching resources page, but I'm in the process of building a separate page devoted just to AI. So that's not ready yet. It's been a busy week. So just be on the lookout for more information coming from the CTL about all of this stuff. So watch your email, watch the website. It's coming soon. Regina, do you have anything you want to add before we wrap? Okay. Well, thank you all for just a really rich and fantastic discussion. Please thank them once again.